By the time the witness started to sweat, Karina Hale already knew he was lying. Brendan Cole, mid-level executive, mid-sized logistics company, mid-tier courage. On paper, he was a respectable man in a respectable suit. On the stand, he was a man whose spine had started to tremble 2 questions ago. Karina watched the little tells, the tight fingers, the shallow breaths, the way his eyes kept sliding toward the prosecutor's table as if they had promised to catch him if he fell. "Mr. Cole," she asked, voice soft, almost kind, "you reviewed that shipment manifest personally before it left the Newark facility, correct?" He clung to the script. "Yes." "And you stand by that?" "Yes." She nodded like that helped her. Then she walked away from him. Her heels were steady, unhurried. She crossed the well, picked up the remote for the screen, and brought up the scanned manifest. "Let's help the jury," she said. "Would you read the timestamp on that manifest for us?" He leaned forward. 21:37. 9:37 p.m., she translated, still gentle. "And that's accurate as far as you know?" "Yes." Click. The manifest disappeared. A security access log took its place, rows of badge numbers and timestamps. "Mr. Cole, would you confirm your badge ID?" He did. "Read your last exit swipe for that night." Silence. His throat worked. 8 p.m., he finally whispered. "So you left at 8? Karina tilted her head. "But the document you personally reviewed was finalized an hour and 37 minutes later." Her tone stayed mild. Her questions did not. "Did you teleport back into the building? Climb in through a window? Have someone fax the manifest to your thoughts?" A ripple went through the jury box. Not laughter, exactly. Recognition. Karina let it sit. Then she took the story the government had built and pulled one thread, then another, until the nice, tidy narrative around Brendan Cole started to fray. By the time the judge called a recess, the prosecutor's star witness looked less like a trustworthy executive and more like a man who'd been told which lies he was allowed to tell. Karina gathered her files with calm hands. Inside, her brain was already jumping ahead. Motions, jury instructions, possible plea calls. Her phone buzzed. "MP wants you upstairs. Now, now." Of course he did. She left her co-counsel with a quick instruction. "Don't talk to anyone about the recess, we're in good shape," and cut through the maze of hallways toward the elevators. Upstairs, the firm felt different. Quieter, more expensive. The kind of quiet that came with money and doors that closed softly over other people's problems. Conference room 7 waited at the end of a glass corridor. Inside, her managing partner, another senior litigator, and a man in a government-issue suit with a Justice Department pin on his lapel. Karina recognized the pin before the face. Then the name landed. Elias Ward. The U.S. attorney people whispered about when they thought the walls didn't listen. "Karina," Richard said, already on his feet. "Good timing. Sit." She sat. She placed her portfolio on the table like a shield. The man with the pin gave her a bland, professional smile. "Ms. Hale," he said. "Elias Ward, I've been following your work." "I'm still deciding if that's a compliment," she said. Richard tried to laugh. It came out strained. On the table between them lay a thin folder. No client name on the cover, just weight. "We've been retained on a new matter," Richard said. "High profile, time sensitive." Karina's mind flipped through possibilities. Big antitrust. International arbitration. Something that justified pulling her out of an active trial. Elias nudged the folder toward her with 2 fingers. "The indictment will be unsealed soon," he said. "We thought you should see it first." She looked down. On the tab, a single word. Castellano. The name hit her chest like someone dropping a stone in shallow water. No outward splash. All impact underneath. "You're telling me Rafael Castellano hired us?" "Through intermediaries," Richard said quickly. "There's considerable pressure to ensure he has top-tier representation." "Pressure from whom?" Karina asked. "The client? Or the government?" In this rare moment, Elias said softly, Our interests match. He sat back, studying her like she was an exhibit. You've built a reputation, he went on. You hate sloppy prosecutions. You loathe dirty cops. You don't like being used. He didn't mention the driver case. He didn't have to. Mr. Castellano's alleged activities touch a lot of lives. He said, we need him advised by someone who isn't already on his payroll. Someone who understands that due process doesn't mean turning a blind eye. Translation: we want you close enough to him to see everything, and then we want to lean on you. Her fingers itched to open the file. She didn't. What exactly is it you're expecting from me, Mr. Ward? Nothing improper, he said. Just candor. If you find evidence that goes beyond the charges we've filed, if you discover pressure points we haven't seen, you want me to feed them to you, she said, off the record. His smile didn't move, but his eyes went colder. I want you to prevent a dangerous man from gaming the system with another bought and paid for lawyer. And you think that's who I am. I think you know how to spot a lie. I think you don't like being anyone's tool. I'm counting on that. The room hummed with air conditioning and tension. Richard cleared his throat. You'll get full support, he said. Teams, resources, whatever you need. But they want you at the front table. They. Karina looked at her boss. Again, who is they today? Elias's mouth curved. In this case, everyone. She held his gaze for a beat. Then she pulled the folder toward her. Fine, she said. I'll read the file. I'll meet the client. After that, my decisions are mine. Elias's answer was mild. That's all I'm asking. It was, of course, a lie. The detention center smelled like bleach and old fear. Karina followed the guard down the narrow hallway, the echo of her heels swallowed by concrete and metal. Cameras stared from corners. Doors buzzed and clanged. Interview room 4 was a table, 2 chairs, a camera in the corner, and a man who did not look like the word alleged. Rafael Castellano sat with his wrists cuffed in front of him, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. Not tall in the way that intimidated. Tall in the way that said he never struggled to take up space. Karina sat. She opened her notebook. No handshake, no smile, no performance. Mr. Castellano, she said. Miss Hale. His voice was smooth, quiet. The kind of voice that invited confession in other rooms, other lives. We're not going to waste time, she said. Here's how this works. She laid it out in clean lines. I will review everything, discovery, financials, warrants, the parts the government is proud of and the parts they hope I don't notice. If I decide they've stretched the law, I'll say so. If I decide you're past what I can defend with a straight face, I'll say that too. Either way, you won't like some of the questions. You won't like most of the answers. He watched her with a focus that felt like pressure on her skin. The truth rarely makes friends, Kat, he said. We're not here to make you friends, Yurt, she replied. We're here to keep the government honest. And me? Her pen tapped once against the page. Jury's still out. The camera blinked red in the corner. Time was bleeding away. For now, she said, closing her notebook. You do nothing without me. You don't talk about this case to anyone else. You don't sign anything. You don't agree to any deal. You think they'll come with one soon. I think they already have, she said. And if they haven't, they're on their way. She pushed her chair back. The metal scraped softly. He rose when she did. Reflex, manners, habit. She wasn't sure. Ms. Hale, he said. She met his eyes. They're not the only ones who will come to you, he said quietly. You know that, don't you? Images flashed without permission. Ward's calm certainty. Richard's forced smile. The way the firm had said this cannot wait. Karina lifted her chin. I understand more than you think. He held her gaze a heartbeat longer than was comfortable. I chose you long before they did, he said. Don't let them use you against me. The door clanked open behind her. Time, the guard called. Karina broke the connection, walked out, and didn't let herself exhale until 2 locked doors and 1 metal detector were between them. She had expected a monster. Or a charming liar. Something simple. What she'd found instead was a man who had already factored her into his plans. 9 years earlier, Rafe had sat at the back of a much smaller courtroom and watched another version of her. The room had buzzed under bad fluorescent lights. The paint had peeled. The judge had looked bored enough to nap. On the defense side sat a kid with a file and a life that was about to be crushed by a system that considered him expendable. Jonah Vega. Wrong neighborhood, wrong night, wrong officer. Rafe could have fixed it the old way. He knew which detectives took envelopes, which clerks lost key pieces of paper, which witnesses changed their stories if you visited their mothers first. But that time, he'd wanted to try something else. Find out who they gave him, he'd told Silvio. Public defender, Silvio had snorted. Some new girl, cheap suit. Name's Karina Hale. Rafe had rolled the name around in his head like a coin. Then he'd bought himself a seat in the back row. He'd expected someone already broken in. Eyes dead, voice resigned, she'd stood in that cramped room in her too big blazer, taken Officer Reynolds' neat story about a malfunctioning body camera, and sliced it apart one quiet question at a time. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just relentless. By the time the jury came back, Jonah's shoulders were no longer hunched around his ears. The officer's shirt was damp with sweat. Not guilty had rung through the room like a sound the building didn't know how to carry anymore. Rafe had watched Karina walk out into the hallway, leaning against the wall for a second when she thought she was alone. Her hands still shook. Her spine did not. He'd added her name to the part of his mental ledger reserved for things that could not be bought. And now, years later, she sat across from him in a federal interview room with a rich firm behind her, the government around her, and no idea just how many people had drawn invisible circles around her life. No idea how many games she'd been pulled into. Yet. The Castellano indictment sat like a small bomb in the middle of the firm's conference table. Karina flipped through page after page, highlighter skating over charges, dates, shell companies, union contracts, charitable foundations. On one side of the page, crimes that could bury a man like Rafe forever. On the other, jobs, pensions, scholarships, neighborhoods stitched to his empire in ways the government didn't want to talk about on camera. If they pull all of this up by the root, she said, not looking up, they don't just cut off his oxygen. They take out every dock worker with a pension tied into those funds. Every kid on a scholarship through his foundation. Every small business sitting on his leases. One partner shifted uncomfortably. So we protect him. We protect due process, Karina said. If they can prove he broke the law, they don't get to burn half the city to the ground as a bonus. Later, across the street from the courthouse, she sat at a cafe table opposite Elias Ward. No recording. Just a sealed envelope between them, untouched. Off the record, he'd said, sliding it toward her. You'll want to see this. She hadn't opened it. Not there. You're trying to recruit me, she said. I'm trying to make sure you're not blindsided, he replied. There are things about Castellano's world that go beyond the papers you've seen. Choices, collateral. If you want my cooperation, charge him properly and prove your case in court, she said. I don't put my thumb on anyone's scale in dark corners over coffee. And if you find things that don't fit neatly in testing evidence, he asked, then I'll have decisions to make, and she said, but they'll be mine. He studied her for a long moment, eyes cool over the rim of his cup. You're going to be a problem, he said at last. For you? For everyone. Her apartment had always been small and stubborn. Fifth floor walk-up, pre-war bones, windows that shivered in storms. It was hers. The deadbolt usually stuck when the weather turned damp. She had to lean her shoulder into it, twist, curse under her breath. That night, the door swung open too easily. A little warning bell went off in her chest. Not loud, just enough to make her set her keys down slowly instead of tossing them toward the bowl. The living room looked normal. Couch, laptop on the coffee table, a mug in the sink she'd meant to wash that morning. And on the kitchen counter, where there had been nothing when she left, lay a single glossy photograph. Her, walking out of the detention center. Head down, expression neutral, portfolio tucked under her arm. A neat red circle inked around her face. No note. She could call the police. She could call the firm. or she could admit what the photo really meant. She was officially on the board now. Had she made a mistake? Agreeing to this case? Taking this client? Letting the government talk to her like she was an asset in their long game instead of a human being with an address and a heartbeat? She thought of Jonah Vega. Of all the small, scared people she'd fought for who never had a choice, was she any better now? Or had she just traded up? From cheap suits and broken courtrooms to designer threats and men who smiled while they drew circles around her life? She didn't know if she was brave or just in way, way over her head. But the moment she saw that red ring around her face, one thing became violently clear. There was no out anymore. She was in the war now, between the devil she was defending and the system that wanted to break them both and call it justice. And someone out there had just marked her as fair game.